Welcome. I'm Rogers Anderson, the Williamson County Mayor, and today we have a special treat. We don't often get to interview people on this show for more than 30 minutes, and today we're going to try to do about an hour. We've got an individual from Augusta, Georgia, and as you can see from the cup, his name is Jimmy Drew. He is our Midway presenter for our Williamson County Fair, and he's got a long history in the fair business. Jimmy, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Let's just jump right into this. The Williamson County Fair has been very fortunate in the 13 prior years. We're having the 14th year fair coming up. You've been with us every single year. We've been just absolutely, a good old Southern term, tickled pink of having you here and the way you operate. But before we actually talk about the fair and the rides you bring and what you bring to a county fair such as ours, let's talk a little bit about the Drew name and how long has it been around. Take us back to kind of in the beginning and the events that led up to your parents starting it and getting involved with it. And we certainly want to touch on the article that was just recently in the paper on the Wall Street Journal. So the show's yours. Kind of take us from the beginning. How did you get started?
Well, I can go back a little further than that. I come from a railroad family. Papa, my granddaddy, was section foreman on the Savannah and Atlanta Railway Company. Before that, he was with the Wadley Southern, a little short line from Wadley to Macon. But anyway, they were in Rennes, Georgia in 1931. My father was 17 years old, and he looked at my aunt one day, supposed to be hoeing in the garden. He dropped that hoe down as the circus train came through to get water for the locomotive. And my Aunt Inez said, he looked at her and said, if I stay in Rennes, I'm never going to have anything. And he jumped on the circus train, and here I am. Now, Cole Brothers Circus, I have to tell you, that was the last circus. They were moving 80, 90 railroad cars, loading and unloading every night. Back in those days, they had to take their own coliseum in the form of a 200 by 600 foot tent because there were no coliseums. And that was the last circus that was bigger than Ringling, and he met my mother there. And here I am.
In those days, when you're, as a boy, I'm sure you were like most traditional boys. You worked around your father, worked around your mother, did a lot of traveling, but apparently it got in your blood.
Well, there's something magical if you can take and do an amusement park. Forget the word carnival. I'm talking about a real amusement park and be as good or better than most and move it every week. They got away from the circus in around 1948. They bought a carousel with 20 wooden horses, and it's been here at the Williamson County Fair. We have a 1960 model also, but that 1948 has probably the prettiest carousel horses that I have ever seen, and we've had it restored 2 or 3 times. And it's maybe the only carousel, except for a very rare amusement park or so, it's got the original 1919 or 1915 band organs on it. Now, you just don't see that anymore. It's not tape. It's the real music.
Well, Jimmy, when you're talking about the fair over the last, coming up on 100 years, not too far off.
That's right.
And your family, when I think of fairs, I grew up outside of Knoxville, and we would go to the local Knoxville fair called the TVA&I Fair. Now, Mother didn't like us going for a lot of reasons because of the influence, but she would let us go. Daddy okayed it. We have a few dollars, we'd go and spend it. But some of the things around the fair back in those days, you just don't see in the fair today. And a lot of that is a credit to you and your organization by cleaning up part of this Midway, the fair, so that you don't have all the negative connotations. I can honestly say, tell the people, the years that I've been here, I've heard it over and over and over. Keep the fair clean. Come up with a theme. We've built ours around agricultural and education. But talk to us a little bit about those early days and how hard it really was.
Well, to start with, I want to make a comment of what you said about the negative parts of a fair. If you want to be good with a fair midway, number one, you have to really love it. And I mean, really love it. And then the next thing, you have to really look at what you don't like about a fair. Well, I don't like the same things about a fair that most other people don't like. My grandbaby is 15 years old. She's been here since she was born. My son, too. And I want her to be on nice equipment. And I want her to be around nice people. And I don't want her to be around people that can't pass a drug test, just like any other good business. So that's how you be good. You know what you don't like, get rid of that first, and then try to improve on what you do like.
You've got employees that have been with you a long time. A lot of people think that a Midway comes to town, Exposition comes to town, they hire the locals, they hire who they can't find anywhere else. That's not true with yours. You've got people that work with you 20 plus years.
Well, not only we have people that's been with us 50 and 60 years before, before they passed away, and we have been blessed to have good people. But the crane operators, there's lots of secrets that you have to do. But my grandbaby asked me 2 or 3 times, she says, Grandpa, she said, I want to know how to run a fair midway. She said, I want to know everything. I said, you got to learn 2 things first. And I said, when you can tell me these 2 every time and don't miss, I said, number 1 is how you treat the people, and number 2 is what you do with the money. Now, do you go do silly things with the money, or do you invest it back into business where it will bear fruit? Now, I'm talking to the farmers now, so it will bear fruit for the future. If you buy new equipment and good trucks and nice people, then it'll get better, and it just gets a little better every year. Another thing, when your customers come, don't let them leave unhappy. Even if they're wrong, my father always says, if they're wrong, they think they're right. So make them happy, whatever that takes,
When you think about your career, and for you that don't know, Jimmy and I are about the same age, but you've run it like a business for all these years. You've had to have a bottom line that will allow you to purchase some of these equipment, because this equipment, generally speaking, is not made in the United States. And a lot of this equipment you get has to be refurbished, an enormous amount of money.
Rides now, it's like everything else. It's like an automobile. They don't get any cheaper. And the rides, when I was growing up, like for instance, the Seattle Wheel, the only production model they ever made, and just shows you what American workers can do. I'm so proud of it. American workers can do anything, and they can do it as good or better than anybody on the planet, probably some other planets as well. But the Seattle Wheel was made in Buffalo, New York, by all American workers. We got the only one. You've seen it here many times. Overseas, this year, we have a new ride called a Matterhorn. And my son and my grandbaby, they were at the factory. It's just outside of Venice, about 30 miles. And they went to the factory, and they was telling me what a great spaghetti place that they had in the middle of town. And I said, well, you just really like the food, Carly? I said, you love that Italian food? She said, Grandpa, she said, I love the food. She said, but it's been pasta every day, and I'm tired of it. But that ride was put on the boat just maybe a month ago, and it landed in the port of Savannah. And it was trucked to the Western Kentucky Fair, which was last week where it operated the first time. And now we got one more ride, and I'm afraid it's not going to make the fair this year, but I got to tell you about it anyway. The other one is the bumper cars, and I got a picture of my grandbaby in the bumper car, and every one of them is themed back like a New York taxi. And that was her idea. And I said, Carly, so they're made by the same Italian manufacturer, because these are the bumper cars that rarely break down. Bertazon is the company, and they have that reputation. So I said, Carly, what gave you the idea of having all these New York taxi cabs, and the name of the ride is going to be NYC Taxi, I said, why did you do that? She said, well, Grandpa, she said, that's the way they drive up there. So she wanted that. So we'll have that probably a little further. I don't know that it can make the fair this year. Last year we had 3 rides. Let me tell you just a minute about those. One of them was the Surfer, which is the one you set on the seats and it goes way up, and its theme has surfboards. Then we had a kiddie ride with logs. Only one of those they ever made, a little swing log for kiddie rides. The other one was Dalmatians, where you can, and what we like about Dalmatians is the mother and the whole family can ride inside the puppy, the Dalmatian, and sit down. And it hadn't been, in the last 15 or 20 years, there was not a ride except a tilt-a-whirl, sometimes a Ferris wheel, and a carousel where the parents could ride together. You just didn't see them. They didn't make, they was either for small kids or they were for big kids, but they wasn't where the whole family could ride. But now we're getting away from that now.
Jimmy, I want to go back to the article that was recently in the newspaper, the Wall Street, and it made reference, in fact, you're quoted in that article a couple, 2 or 3 times. Tell us about the train wreck that occurred and how all that led up to and how your family was involved in that.
Well, and I've been around the Showman's League my whole life. Showman's League of America. It's based in Chicago. It's the oldest fraternal club in North America. My father was on the board of directors, board of governors. Back when I was growing up, he was on the board of governors all those years. I've been president of it twice. I was president of in 1984. I was president again in 2008. And the first president was the guy by the name of William F. Cody. If you don't recognize that name, it was Buffalo Bill. And then John Warren was president for the next 5 years, and the two of those guys went to Forest Park, Woodlawn Cemetery on Cermak Road in Chicago, and they bought these 750 grave sites. And it wasn't but about 2 years later, and that was 1913 was Buffalo Bill, and then up to maybe 14 to 18 was John Warren. So we've always tried to keep our history alive because, as I told the Wall Street Journal reporter, if we don't know where we've been, how are we going to know where we're going? And our history is important, especially the benevolent aspect of it. So anyway, they bought these grave sites. It wasn't but a few months later at a little crossing called Ivanhoe, Indiana, which is Hammond. It was 5.5 miles east of Hammond, Indiana, which is, again, is a suburb of Chicago. The train was parked on the side of the track, I guess getting water, I think they said, for the locomotives back then. And a World War I troop train came flying through there with the engineer asleep. And he ran into the back of it, and it killed a little less than 100 people. And 62 of them are buried in our Showman Cemetery. So they had, last month, the 100-year memorial service took place at the site of the grounds. There's a Napier, Illinois, has a circus band with all these old guys that used to play in the circus bands, and they were all there with their brass and their tubas and everything. The World Circus Museum in Peru, Indiana, brought a circus wagon, and it was really a grand affair. We had a priest, and we had a Baptist minister, I guess, 2 or 3 ministers. We had a lady rabbi that chanted she actually sang the 23rd Psalm in Hebrew. So it was quite a little affair, and we remembered what happened before us, which is what we were there for.
So, were you're talking about the Showman? Your family was involved in that. Were they transporting the fair at that time by rail? Is that what I understand?
All of the fairs back in those days were transported by rail because there were very few, my father called them hard roads. Back in the early days, they didn't call them paved roads, they called them hard roads. And they went to all the little towns, and at the time, and I used to ask this question, I said, how can I go the little communities, like say, just outside of Augusta, where I'm from, and you go to the little town of Goff and Hepzibah, where I went to school, and you go through Wadley, Georgia, and all these, Bartow, and all these towns, And I said, all these beautiful brick buildings are still here, and they look like the brick was just built. You know how brick looks, 100 years old. It don't age too much. And I said, why are these towns not thriving? And somebody looked at me one day, I can't remember. I think it was one of the people who ran a barbecue place here in Bartow. He said, that was before automobiles. He said, used to be, you had the towns were placed about as far as you could walk in 2 or 3 hours, you know. And then after that, the automobiles came. Well, they all went to Augusta, or they all went to Macon, or somewhere else. But those railroads were all thriving, real thriving lines back then. And the circuses, they would thrive playing small towns. Well, not anymore. It's all changed.
So Jimmy, in those early days, were fairs and circuses together, or was it mostly the circus and then the fairs broke off? How did we get to the point we have fairs today?
Well, they're two separate businesses, two separate industries. The circus was the circus, and the circus was usually self-contained. And an example would be is Ringling, which is a large, again, they had a major tent. Their main tent was the size of a coliseum. It was 200 by 600, and they had about 50 tents. They had one tent for the elephants and one for the, you know, just like that for the horses and so on and so forth. Then the fairs, the way the fairs started, but when you go back to the very early history, and I'm talking close to the founding of our great republic, the fairs they started out as just agricultural exhibitions, and the best ones today are still agriculturally dominated. But they needed money to pay, and it's same as today as it was 200 years ago. They needed money for the premiums, so they had to get some things out there that they didn't have to pay for, that they could be paid, and that's where the rides came in.
So when you talk about those large fairs that you have played and you are still playing, and I'm not sure right off the top of my head how many dates you play in a given year. I'll let you tell us that. But there's been some of the areas that you've gone to for decades and set up a fair midway at that particular fair. Not necessarily ours. You've been here 14 years. We're grateful for that. But the Appalachia Fair, for an example, there's a great friend of yours that taught you a lot about the fair. I've heard you repeat that over and over. But how many dates do you do a year? How do you determine where a fair is going to be?
We're doing less fairs. We're trying to work less and have bigger and better fairs, and that's what we're doing. This year, 22 fairs, I think, 22 dates. We start at the Cherry Blossom Festival in Macon, Georgia, where a great lady, Carolyn Creighton, is still there. She don't operate, but she was the founder of the festival, and she's on the World Festival Board. She travels all over the world, and she tells everybody that we are the Walt Disney of the fair and festival business. I just love Carolyn Creighton. She's such a grand lady. Every now and then I send her a fountain pen, and I told Becky and Paul and all of them in my office, I said, as soon as she gets this fountain pen, I said, it won't be a day I'll have a thank you note. And she sends me a thank you note. She starts, my grand and dear Jimmy Drew. That's Carolyn Creighton. So, but now, the fair you mentioned, the Appalachian Fair in East Tennessee, we've operated there since 1954. Gray, Tennessee, and Mr. Niles Gray was the founder of the fair. He's not there now, he's gone. But I tell everybody he's arguably the greatest fairman I have ever known and ever worked with. And you could not tell, in his 6 days of his fair, you could not tell a Monday from a Saturday. You didn't know which one's going to be the best, because they were all pretty close. And one night I had the manager of the Atlanta Fair, one of the big shows, and we were standing at the Appalachian Fair in a steady, not a rainstorm, but a steady rain, pretty hard rain. And Confederate Railroad was in the grandstand that night, and we were standing under our office tent, and we had 100-foot lines on every ride at the fair in a steady rain. And Jim Miller, now after Jim Miller died, they named the park after him. It's Jim Miller Park in Marietta, and his son now runs the fair. But he looked at me when he saw that line. He said, I didn't know it was possible for this to happen. He went back with Mr. Gray, and they started talking real close, and they got to be friends. And Mr. Gray really loved me, and he would do anything to help somebody else have a good fair, because he wanted to see us be good. And the next thing you know, 2 or 3 years later, the biggest fair in Georgia was under Jim Miller. He got the Atlanta Journal behind him as a sponsor. He did this and that and the other, and very low gate prices. You know, he let all the kids, all high school kids came in for $1, and he just had that little touch about him.
Well, for those people that are watching the show, there's several components of a fair as far as the money is concerned at the local level. And without getting into the weeds too deep, one of them's the ticket prices, one of them's sponsorships. Many fairs do sponsorships like we do, where your main businesses in town want to participate and help and get their name out. But it's really about holding a local event for your people to enjoy. We've enjoyed a lot of success of our fair, and it's because of all of the volunteers we've had. But one component of that early on, we called several other fairs around the Tennessee area. They were really good fairs. And it's interesting that you would make the comment about Gray's, Mr. Nile and Mr. Miller. The same could be said with a gentleman up at the Wilson County Fair that was very helpful to us in our early days. And his telling us what to try and what not to try. Now, you are not playing the Wilson County Fair because it kind of overlaps ours, and then you have to go up to Gray, Tennessee. But the difference I'm learning after 14 years, the difference of a good fair are your people that you have got engaged. We have about over 12 to 1,400 volunteers. Some of them are only in 3-hour windows. Some of them are in several days. But we only have 3 paid people, and that's our paid secretary and our sponsorships that sell our vendors, and they work off a commission, and our sponsorships. The last component of that is when you come to town, you have to balance the books for the future fairs. You have to balance off the rides. You've been very gracious with sharing some of that revenue with us. We appreciate that, and our fair has been able to never be in the red in the 14 years that we've been there. We've had a lot of good people. Dave Crouch was our first chairman for a couple of years. He took it and ran with it, worked with you. But as I look out into the future, the name of the game is also not always having 50 to 75 different events that you've got to travel to, because I imagine, I just guess, loading up all that equipment, transporting it, the trucks, the gas, the labor cost, all of those go into the bottom line of your fair. If you make $1 and spend $1, my math tells me you're not making any money. And I don't think it's any different than what it was 50 years ago, but you probably had people, your daddy and others, had to work a lot harder than they do today, but the cost of things weren't what they were either.
I want to say that is so true, what you say, but I want to go back. You said something like Mr. Niles Gray, arguably the best fair manager I have ever worked with. He was, or let me say it the other way around, Hale Moss, who Wilson County people will know who he is, was the driving force behind the Wilson County Fair. Hale Moss was Niles Gray. He was Niles Gray. They were the same person, and guess what? This is going to surprise you. They were best friends.
Yeah.
And Mr. Gray, they would help each other, and they were best friends. So I always say, if I can just work with good people and good management. Disney, somebody says, well, how low can you go? And I said, well, as far as numbers of dates that we do, I said, well, look at Disney World. Disney World just works one place. So, the local component is the most important thing. We have never lost. We're not into the commercial. We are in the local component because it's always more exciting when you were involved with roots in the community?
Jimmy, when you look back over your history, and I need to touch on before I forget this. About 45 years ago, you found somebody that would keep you straight, and I would have liked to have got her on the show. Your wife, Evangeline, and then you've had one son. When you look back over the period of time that you've worked, I'm sure there's one single event that stands out that I shouldn't have done that, or I shouldn't have gone there, or I should have done something different. But then by the same token, there's probably that one single event that you're very proud of, and that oftentimes it may not even be known to the general public. You're involved in a lot of fair associations that we're involved in. You have your trade show. You have things in your world that are important to you. But if you could just highlight maybe one or two of the things you're proudest of, other than your wife and your children and your granddaughter. Everybody knows you love your granddaughter. Carly's a sweetie. And a couple of things that you say, well, if I had that to do over again, I'd probably do it a different way.
Well, to start with, the thing that I love the most is when it all works right, and you can open up, say, on a Saturday morning early, and the sky is blue and yellow, and it's just not yellow. There I go. Excuse me, yellow, white clouds and blue sky, and it all works. Everything is working. No rides are broke down. We don't have any parts that get back ordered from Italy that's going to keep us down for a week, and that stuff happens to you. So the most wonderful thing you can do, and this really fits Franklin, is when you can work with wonderful volunteers in a wonderful area. And my wife, if she could do it, she would move me here. She loves it so good. So now that's the upside. The downside, I got to tell you this, I have people just about every year want to know how they can break into this business and get started because they want to operate a traveling show. So if you want to operate a traveling show, you need to operate on the downside first, because Richard Nixon said before he left office, only when you've been in the low valleys do you appreciate the significance of the high peaks. Y'all remember those words?
I do.
But anyway, here is the downside. They need to start out, if they want to start out and be high later, they got to go to eastern Kentucky, and I'll pick a good county like Prestonsburg or Pikeville, back when we were running smaller shows, and you're sitting out there on a dirt lot or a grass lot, and the emergency rescue people come tell you that the lot's going to be underwater in about 5 hours. And so you're trying to get everything out of there. Or Buchanan, West Virginia, to Strawberry Festival, where it got underwater, and the only thing you could see was the head of the horse is sticking out of the water. Buchanan County Strawberry Festival, remember that. And so now you're trying to get everything out. You get most everything out. Now you got the bumper car trailer with those big old steel plates, and they come out and somebody hooks the winch in the wrong place and tears the whole bottom end out from under the thing, and it's impossible to get. You can't find the wreckers in 20 miles, or the welder is 20 miles away. And so you wind up losing about 3 loads out of sight that you can't even see, and it takes another year to restore them and get them where they can even be moved. So that's where you got to start. You got to start there first, and then you can get better from there.
It's a great time. I missed a little promo that we had earlier. We were going to show a clip of the 2017 fair that we had out at the Ag Center. So I think it would be a good time if the audience would look at this couple-of-minute clip and see the rides, the detail that Jimmy and his men and women put into having the good lights, the LED lights, how they're clean, how they're very visible, how they're painted. And this clip will show you some of those. Well, Jimmy, now we'll just go right on into the next phase of this. I know there's been some stories that I've heard, so now I got to call on you to tell a few of those stories. I know you could spend a whole show talking about Mr. Graves and what he meant to you, but one of the things I've got to ask you about that I want you to talk to a little bit about, because I love it. I would have it at our fair every year if we could, and that's the pipe organ.
Well, the pipe organ is something that we plan to bring back this year.
Well, talk about the history of this thing. I mean, it's just an amazing piece of equipment. You don't ride on it, you don't sit on it, you sit and watch it and listen to it.
And it's really kind of funny, some of the things. When you ask me a question, it brings another story. Here we are, one of our fairs is the North Carolina Mountain State Fair. It's operated by the state Department of Agriculture. And we brought that pipe organ about the first year that we were there. We started that fair 30 years ago with the local group, and then the state wanted to take the fair over, and the state of North Carolina took it over. And here I am sitting on one of our beautiful redwood benches in front of the pipe organ, and a guy comes up and he said, what is this? I said, it's a band organ. He said, well, what does it do? I said, it plays. He said, well, it plays. He said, well, what's on the other side? I said, well, that's the organ. Yeah, if you want to see. I said, I don't mind showing you. And he said, well, what's the gig? I said, what do you mean, what's the gig? I said, the gig is when I was a little boy, my father got this organ. I was born in 45, and he got it about 49. And I can remember I'd sit out there for an hour or two, but I'd sit in front of that organ every day and listen. And I got a little older, and I learned how to do the rolls, so I'd switch the rolls so I could hear all of the music, and I just absolutely, it's a young people thing. It's for real young kids and real old kids, you know.
Well, I know where we fit in now.
We're in the middle. So, you know, or not in the middle, we're at one end of the. So now this guy, he said, well, I said, I want children to know how fair sounded 100 years ago. And he looked at me real skeptical. He said, well, in that back door, he said, you got a dice table in there or something? I said, a what? I said, excuse me. The guy couldn't believe we put an organ for the kids can hear it play. And you know, he couldn't understand that. I mean, had to be our beautiful trash frames that are similar to the Augusta National Golf Club, where we're from. Our trash frames and our organ, and we got so many things around. You can't put a ticket in front of them. You can't make money doing it. You just do it because it's better. You do it because you want to do it. You know, you do it because it's good.
Talk about this organ and what music it plays, and I mean they don't make these anymore.
Well,
Jimmy.
this organ, I'm going to tell you, my father, it might have been $10,000, but I think he paid $5,000 for it in maybe 1949 or 50, something like that. And when a new car was, whatever it was, $800. But anyway, it came from a lady by the name of Mabel Reed, and she was in Tampa, and her and her husband had a railroad traveling show, and he died. So she had this, and my daddy found out about it, and he bought it. So it's been restored a couple times, and now the last time it was restored was 1994, and we put in Indiana, we found a company it's got a trailer that looks just like a German, a rounded top, beautiful trailer. It's a German organ. As a matter of fact, the German people, a few of them talk about us on the internet, not very good. But they talk about this organ, people, it's got a following. Wide following of people, and the Germans don't like the fact that it was converted from German cardboard music that folds like cardboard to Wurlitzer 165. Now Wurlitzer is 165 is the long roll of Wurlitzer. This organ owns the largest collection of 165 music in the world. And the way that happened is a fellow by the name of Matthew Caulfield in Rochester, New York. For 37 years, he was the curator for the Smithsonian roll music is what he did. And so I asked Matthew one day, I'm talking to him, I said, could you work for me long enough so I can have a full collection? He said, well, sure. I said, well, you know where to find the rolls. He said, yes, I do. And so the ones that we couldn't find, he took Seabreeze Park roll that maybe had that same roll, or another park that had that roll, and he had a fella in Pennsylvania that had the copying machines, and he copied the roll. But we wound up with all the copies. This, I want to tell you, is the only organ in existence known to play every note in a 165 roll. It plays every note. The 165 organs, there's probably 20 of them. The roll was made for the 165 pipe organ, band organ, and but it don't play every note. You had to get a 166. I guess this is marketing, the way marketing works. You have to buy the 166. You play a few more notes, and if you buy 167, you can get all of the notes. Well, you can play every note in the paper if you own a 167, according to the Encyclopedia of Musical Instruments, and some people listening to this will have it. That encyclopedia only made 3 167s and none survive. Nobody's been able to find a 167. This is the only one that plays every note. So it also we went through and had the guys, there's a fellow by the Matthew up in Pennsylvania as well. And we got all these guys together and all the people. And one of the engineers, John Malone, for California Power and Light. These guys do this for a hobby. John Malone has the original Wurlitzer cutting machines that cuts these notes. And we had 2 gospel music rolls made for this organ. I want to do a country music and a bluegrass. I just hadn't got to it yet.
Well, it's probably one of my favorite rides non-rides that you bring to the fair. It is wonderful. It's majestical in the way that the kids just stop, and particularly little kids, and they'll just dance, they'll play, and the older people, like you said, they'll just sit there on the benches and listen to it. And I hope that people that are watching this, whether you're young or old, have an opportunity to observe this, because it is one of a very, very few left in the United States. Jimmy, when I think of your fair, I think of a fair that's clean, that's presentable to the general public. One of the things, and as you know, Diane Giddens and many of the others that participate and help run the fair all year long, cleanliness out at the fairgrounds, we learned early on from you, is have plenty of containers so people will drop their soft drink, their popcorn, their tea, all in. Try to keep your fairgrounds clean. Keep your restrooms clean. All of those components are going into running a good business to invite people so it doesn't look trashy. As you know, at our fair, we don't have alcohol that we sell. I'm not going to say some doesn't slip in, but we've got a good law enforcement group that kind of monitors. Today's standards have changed a great deal than what they used to be, but purses are checked for alcohol and for weapons and et cetera. But when I think about fairgrounds and the difference of our fair versus a lot of the others and the volunteers that go in it, it's the whole image of the fair, and particularly from your side, your men being and women being drug tested and wearing shirts and giving the image that it's not just a rundown old nasty place to come. We absolutely have to have a good clean fair. I haven't been to as many fairs as you have. You'll go in 1 year more than I will have an opportunity to see probably in a lifetime. But the ones that I have been to, the real good fairs, the ones that are successful, manage to pull that off in a way people are friendly, things are clean, the rides look good, there's lots of lighting. It's best, we don't have it totally yet, but have a place for your fair to be sitting on hard surface as opposed to those little dirty fields that you used to play in. But if you can add something every year to your fair, a different ride, a different event, change it up, people will come to the fair. And it's amazing, even in Williamson County. Our county continues to grow. We have people coming in from California and Florida and Michigan. But when they go to the fairs, I believe we would hold the record for the fairs with the most strollers. I have always said that's a good sign for the future. But up around the kiddie rides where you're at, they are lined up during the day, not necessarily at night. That's when the teenagers come out. But I'm amazed at how well our fair has been accepted in our community. And a lot of that goes to the rides, the safety of the rides. There can always be an accident. But I know you spend a great deal of time before the first customer ever gets on those rides. You have people inspect them. Talk us through a little bit about what goes in when you're setting that fair up.
Well, first thing I would like to say that as far as inspection goes, our James Graybill, who is our manager, is a Class 7 inspector. We've got a couple more here on our midway. And these rides here in Franklin have been inspected by the same people that inspect Six Flags 1 year. Last year, I think we had the inspector for Cedar Point, which is that's the largest roller coaster location in the world. More roller coasters there than anywhere else. We have had all of the best safety inspectors. James has been president of the National Amusement Ride Safety Association. They go every year. We send a delegation to it. This year was in Baton Rouge. I think last year was Orlando. The year before that was in Myrtle Beach. But these guys are all dedicated to safety. We got a lot of good people. And if something happens on an amusement ride, if it's an accident, well, last year, I hate to talk about accidents, but there was up north, there was an accident. We knew about it in 15 minutes. Somebody picked the phone up and called us. But the amusement ride is a little bit different than automobiles. If something happens, say in Oregon or Idaho, it's big news because it doesn't happen. You don't hear about it as much. So safety is the one thing that just preoccupies everything that we do because it'll put you out of business.
That's important to remember. And I don't want to dwell on it, but I do want to stress to the people that are watching this show that a lot of effort goes in on your part, a lot of money goes in to making sure those rides are put together, they perform, and do what they're supposed to be with a safe record. And I appreciate and I thank you for that. A couple of other points before I forget it. Where's the Fair of the Future going to be? What is it going to look like with all this technology that for you and me, it's our grandchildren. Where's the future fair going to be?
I think the fairs in the middle, I don't know about fairs, but I think the midways in the future might disappear because of the cost of the equipment and the cost of everything else. I think you're going to see more and more of the bounce houses and the birthday party things and the ones that just go in the community, little community groups, and then you're going to see the larger ones. It's going to join, but it'll change for sure, like everything does.
Sure.
But it will probably go toward more. The shows like us we are closer to an amusement park than we are a carnival now, and I think that will probably keep going that direction.
So the future of fairs, of course, you're talking about the amusement side. We're talking about the local fair. So you think in the future that it'll be more stationary equipment than something like a Six Flags or a Disney?
I think we have fairs now where we have permanent rides. It's stay in place. You know, they're large fairs like in Atlanta, like in Asheville, and and yes, I think there'll be some more of that as we go. And the ones that are tuned in to their customers, in other words, how do you want your children and your grandchildren to be treated? That's the big thing. That's the really big thing. I mean, when my little grandbaby, who's not too little now, 15, but she just loves to jump on all of these rides and ride them. Well, do I want her mistreated? Do I want her to ride on anything less than the best? And I don't want it for anybody else's grandkids either.
But the good fairs, and I've been fortunate to be around Todd Miller. I think he's as good a fair operator around down in the Georgia area. He continues, and I think all of us steal ideas from somebody else. I know when I was in my own personal business before I became mayor, I don't know if we'd call it stealing, but we'd take somebody else's idea and try to plug it into what we're doing. It's very hard to recreate every single thing you do. But I think those good fairs do. I look at our fair here at Williamson and Williamson County, and I know how you have changed. When we first got into it, we didn't have automatic. A lot of things that were automatic. Today, you can buy your tickets online. Today, you can go to your phone and communicate back and forth. We've taken care of a lot of our technology, which has saved us in labor costs, we've been able to hold our prices down. I know you the same way. There was a time that all fairs were, in those early days for us, they were about cash. Today, well over a third of our business is in credit cards and better. And more people are buying tickets online. They're taking their phones out. We spend an enormous amount of time and money trying to get people to go to a particular area to get their tickets, because the success for the vendors, the men and women that come in and sell the pizza and the ice cream cones and et cetera, you've got to have customers coming through the door so that they want to come back. I know that's not all in your area. I would lots rather just have a fair without any vendors, but that day's never going to come, because people like eating the fair food and seeing the different things that are out there. But it'd make life a lot easier if you couldn't do it. I look at our fair that we've been able to have, even though we've got a wonderful building, you've commented on it, the Ag Center itself, it's both a curse and a blessing. It's so big, you have to figure out how to live within the confines of that. You need smaller areas. I might disagree with you. I think in the years to come that local communities that can read their customer, that can excite people to want to come out. We are competing, particularly here in Williamson County and Franklin. There's something going on every weekend. So what's going to make them come to the fair? And thank goodness, I believe it's going to be people like you. They can't get these good, safe rides. Lots of people come for ag. Last year we wrote, maybe correctly, a little over $75,000 out in premiums for beef cow, best chicken, you name it. Best show, and the sheep and the goats and all the things that go on. That's why you charge those prices to come in to help offset some of those costs. But I do believe a lot of people come to the fair to eat the food that I'm not always the craziest about, but they do come also to ride those rides when they're safe. And we hear it all the time that people feel comfortable on your rides. People because they're well lit, they're clean, and your operators, for the most part, are good men and women that run them. We also bring our community in. I'm putting a plug in. We've got 3 or 4 area high schools that help us pull off this fair, and then we write a check to them for their band boosters or for their whatever organization they're representing. And so we've incorporated as many of these ideas from people like you telling us what's successful, the Todd Millers, and the many other fairs that are around our community, what works for them. We're not an Iowa State Fair. We will never be an Iowa State Fair. One of our county commissioners that serves on us, his wife shows ag they go back to Iowa every year to spend a week, their vacation, because she grew up in the 4-H side of it, or FHA, whatever, the one she was involved in, and she loves it. Now, I'm trying to get her involved in ours, but here's these people that are coming to our fair are coming from other parts of the country that expect a high-grade fair, and you bring the side of the rides.
You mentioned something about the cash and the money. Used to be we were 100% cash is what we would take in. Nowadays, with credit cards and with ATMs, we don't take half the cash like we used to be. And sometimes when it comes to payroll day, we have to go to the bank to get cash because we don't have enough. And you also touched on something. Say I'm going to use Mr. Niles Gray, I'll use Todd Miller as an example. All of those fair managers that are good guys, and my friend Jim Sinclair at the Minnesota State Fair, arguably the best of the best. That would be the top of the top, Minnesota State Fair. All of these guys get their ideas from other places. Mr. Gray learned how to hang his quilts from the Oklahoma State Fair one year. He came back to town, he was so happy. What it was, just some 2x4s put together and they hung the quilts. He had never thought about it before. Next thing you know, he's doing it. But it's like the driving force behind the Coming Country Fair was an old-fashioned Baptist preacher, and it's always hit me what he said, stuck with me, hadn't left. He was the one that thought of the Coming Country Fair. He said, Jimmy, he said, if we can dream it, we can do it. But you got to dream it first. And the hard part, most people don't realize, the hard part is dreaming it.
I would agree with that. Jimmy, we've got about 3 or 4 minutes left, and then we're going to have to sign off. There's never enough time to talk to you because you've got some great stories. I'm sure there's something that I've overlooked in the time that we've been talking that you'd like to get out or say that I didn't hit on. I would ask that you do that at this time. I certainly want to, while you're thinking of that, put a plug in for our fair. It begins the first weekend in August. The doors will open up at about 5 or 6 o'clock. We'll have the ribbon cutting at 5, but the fair will actually start about 6 o'clock on the first Friday in August, and it'll run 9 days. It's a wonderful opportunity for people to be involved that are watching this show that we could use your help. The volunteers are the backbone. You can't pay for all the things that you want to do for our fair in order to be able to have a successful fair and keep those prices down. But you can volunteer, you can help, and you can contribute back to our community. We give scholarships away, we make improvements to the Ag Center, we pay schools, we do all of the things necessary in order to keep that fair going and run. But it does work hard on the handful of volunteers, 2 or 3 dozen people that put in a lot of time. What have I overlooked that you'd like to say?
Well, I want to say this. The International Association of Fairs and Exposition, which is all your key people know about this group. They have studies in their office, in their library, and documents that a well-run country fair has more of an economic benefit and impact than a major ball club. They have shown it time and time again. Now that's a big secret because we all, and I love ball club, by the way, but that's a big secret. Overlooking the county fair, and what makes the county fair so good is the fact if we were to go out and just get a lot somewhere and stick everything and put rides up and do this, and we wouldn't be 20% as good. Might not be 10% as good. But the fact that it's depth in the community and the community is excited and it is the community fair and it's the community people, that's what makes it big. And that's the secret.
I won't disagree. Of the fairs that I've gone around, you see that element there, whether it's a large AAA fair, AA, or single A. Jimmy, we've got 1 minute, and I want to say, again, thank you for traveling, stopping by on your travels. We're actually taping a show A lot of people would know, and Jimmy and his wife Evangeline are traveling on up the interstate as soon as we finish, but we'll look forward to seeing you back down here in August. Look forward to you bringing your rides, and thank you for what you do for your association, but even more so for our community, that we're able to enjoy good, safe rides. And a lot of that is your dreaming and your son's dreaming. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good to see you.